Hi everyone, I'm Kerry Ryan, Priestess of Goddess, and the creator of this Shadow of the Dark Goddess workshop that you have joined with, along with other women, while we all hold space for each other to journey for a full month from one dark moon to the next as we investigate the shadow aspects of our life. So I invite you now to get an idea of the various goddesses who you will be journeying with, and tell you a little bit about them. So let's have a look at who they are. You all will have chosen a goddess to work with, and I'll speak a little bit about each one individually, but I'll be asking you all to do your own research and find out more about each goddess. I will send you some information and help you set up your own altar with the symbols that represent each of these goddesses. So let's just have a talk about the shadow, what the shadow is, and who the dark goddesses are. And as we can see from this slide, the dark goddesses come to us from our ancient goddess worshipping cultures, societies that recognize death and darkness are just as valid in life as life and light. With our Christian upbringing, mainly in the Western societies, we've been taught to fear the dark and that the dark represents sin, when in fact the darkness is really just a place where we can rest from being on all the time, for being out, to be public. The dark is a place where we can recoup, where we can reflect. And so the dark goddess allows this place as naturally as the light, and she helps us to see that which needs to be understood, but which lives in the unconscious. So the dark goddess can be personal, or she can contain the collective shadow, things like famine and war, disease and disaster, bushfires, death, pain and suffering. The dark goddess has lived with us eternally, and our ability to investigate our shadow through the dark goddesses help us gain information and understanding about that which is generally hidden. The dark goddess is to be faced, accepted, honoured and surrendered to in order to receive the release and transformation that we require. So first of the goddesses that we're going to look at will be Kali. Now, Kali is the Hindu triple mother goddess of creation, preservation and destruction. We get a bit carried away with Kali because she seems to be so gruesome, carrying a necklace of severed heads and a skirt of severed arms. But Kali's destructive energies on the highest level are acts of salvation of the ego, transforming us from our identification with our bodies. She destroys only to recreate, and what she destroys is sin, ignorance and decay. Death with Kali is about death to the ego and our physical illusions. Kali's destructive side clearly speaks to mothers whose roller coaster emotions and frustrations involved with child rearing mean that in order to mould a child in their early years, some aspects of the child's nature must be killed in the process. The mother who is afraid for her child's safety will curtail his or her adventurous spirit. The mother who is worried about her own image and that of her family will try to mould her child into a person whose behaviour is acceptable. With our own bad memories of mothers whose behaviour we said we would never emulate, we often sadly find ourselves repeating just those same errors. So Kali is the terrible mother, she who gives life as well as takes it away. She is connected with women's menstrual cycles as well, nature at its most raw and fundamental cyclic best, demonstrating creation and destruction, light and dark. Next up, of course, is Lilith, and many of you have elected to journey with Lilith. She is the dark goddess of the Hebrew faith, who we are told was the first wife of Adam, created equally by God, not from a rib of Adam as was Eve. Seeing as they were both equal, Lilith refused to lie beneath Adam during intercourse and became angry and fled the Garden of Eden. She was condemned by God to copulate with men in their sleep in unbridled promiscuity. A demon succubus thriving off their sexual energy, bearing over 100 demon children a day. Lilith's history is ancient. She comes way back from the times of Inanna. We're talking 5,000 years ago. As a handmaiden to Inanna, she brought the men to the temple. So she represents the archetype of female sexual empowerment, the seductress and the wild woman who has freedom, independence, and refuses to be subordinate to men. So Lilith speaks to women seeking to become more independent and not to be afraid of their freedom or their sexuality. She represents what the patriarchal religions sought to suppress in women: strong, open emotions, lusty sexual desires, fearlessness in standing up for their rights, showing women that their bodies are not dark places of temptation or dirtiness and disgust that cannot be owned by anyone. We call on Lilith to invoke healing around sexual abuse, incest, and to transmute the shadows of victimhood. Next up is Sekhmet, Egyptian goddess of war and destruction. Sekhmet's all about rage and anger, and you find yourself calling on Sekhmet when you need to protect. She's also known as the Great Mother. Her abilities to rear her cubs with gentleness, care, and compassion are the other side of Sekhmet's raging anger. She's strongly associated with the Kundalini Shakti and the misuse of sexual power. So we call on Sekhmet to represent personal power and boundaries in our lives. We do not allow ourselves to be pushed and pulled and scattering of our energies. She helps us to consolidate those aspects of us that respond in fits of rage and lashing out at those that we love. If we find ourselves creating chaos all around us or dissolving into fits of tears and emotional depression, Sekhmet is the one we call on. She reminds us to draw on our strength, to set our boundaries and effectively manage our lives in all aspects. For those who have called on the Morrigan, she is the Celtic queen of death, battle and sexuality, and she empowers women to be warriors, claiming back their self-esteem. She is the triple source of power needed to regenerate cycles, to take from one life to death and from death to life. Her symbols are the vultures and the owls and the crows. Symbols are something that I'll be asking you to look at for each of the goddesses. The Morrigan and her sisters are also shapeshifters, transporting through the cauldrons that take one from life to death. So she was known on the battlefields. She was one who would predict who would win in battles and who would die. And she also, in a modern context, speaks to the survivors of child and sexual abuse, abusive marriages. And she's all about blood magic. Her worship requires courage, willingness to bear pain. Her function, yes, is to separate the dead souls from the corpses, in the sense that she was the angel of death. She brings death to end suffering. She's the final stroke between life and death for the dying. And so Morrigan is also associated with menstrual blood as a symbol of both life and death, fertility and war. All right, next up is Inanna. And Inanna comes as a sister to Ereshkigal, who we will have a look at in a minute as well. But Inanna is the Sumerian goddess of heaven and earth, and the underworld journey that many of you will be familiar with is the journey that you will go on if you choose Inanna and Ereshkigal as the dark journey of the night of the soul, where you will go into the underworld to meet your sister in the underworld. So she represents your willingness to surrender all of the worldly trappings of status and wealth, in other words, our ego, as she moves through the 7 gates of the underworld to meet with her sister in order to face death and rebirth. Inanna represents our willingness of the individual to face their shadows and make the journey to the underworld or the unconscious. She knew that it was necessary to surrender all her worldly trappings of status and wealth to enter the underworld stripped naked and bare. To meet with her sister Ereshkigal, who is the queen of the underworld. She represents our unacknowledged shadow side and suffering, and speaks of the power that we all gain when we learn to willingly submit to our shadow. The story of Ereshkigal is as exciting or interesting as is Inanna, and when you research her and find out about her story, she's probably one that you don't know very well, and one that is interesting to look into. As goddess of the dead, Ereshkigal is a powerful symbol of the underworld and the power that we all gain when we learn to willingly submit to our shadow, when we are prepared to die, to release that which prevents us from growing and transforming. She is much a part of living as she is of dying, and a necessary aspect of the inexorable transformation of cycle of death, birth, and rebirth. Death, life, and rebirth. Welcome her when she calls you to acknowledge and release that which no longer serves you. Next up is Hecate. She is an ancient triune goddess, which means triple goddess, a moon goddess connected to witchcraft in the crossroads. She is another ancient goddess come down through the Greek line. She is the one that stands at the crossroads. She's a diviner of the dark arts, a fortune teller. She is your classic witch. So Hecate reminds us of the importance of change, helping us to release the past, especially those things that are hindering our growth, and to accept change and the transitions that come with them. Hecate is about new beginnings, whether spiritual or mundane, and they aren't always easy. But Hecate is there to support and show you the way. She gives her far-sightedness abilities for you to see what lies deeply forgotten or even hidden, and helps you make the choices and find your path. Oftentimes she will hold her torch, her lantern, to guide you while you are in your dream and meditation state. So Hecate is a great choice for those who are drawn to the pagan path. She holds a lot of the energies around witchcraft. And then we've got the crone bone mother, the hag. She's the final stage of the triple goddess from maiden, mother, crone. She represents all that has been evil in the mythology of women. Here we come stripped to the bone, laying ourselves open and bare, willing to enter the dark stillness of the tomb, the underworld, where we relinquish all control. And as always, when we come full cycle of journeying into the underworld, we come back to the world again and we are rebirthed. The crone is most powerful in her aspect as one who rebirths us back into the world again. But first we must surrender and die to the ways of the old, and we lay fallow for a period of gestation in the womb of the goddess, and this is where we await rebirth, being born back into the world. So everyone, just wanting to welcome you now on this journey. These are the goddesses you will be journeying with. Please utilize the space of the Facebook page to share with each other. I'll be providing you with all of that information where you can talk and share with me and with the others who are journeying with you. So the information will be coming to you from the 9th, and I look forward to journeying with you all. Blessings, one and all. Safe journeys.